Now, in understanding the importance of seeing and realizing this instruction, which I call basic training, let's understand that it is absolutely fundamental, in my opinion. It is indispensable that we recognize it if we propose to do any serious psychological work, if we propose to do anything that will genuinely improve our lives. Because if it is true, as I firmly believe it is, that every single one of us, we humans, when we come to this planet, absorbs this kind of message, this composite, variegated, complex message about our emotional reality and what should be part of it and what should not be part of it. If we do not know that that message is there, if we do not come to it with a realization of that and cross the threshold into awareness, as I allude to it, and if we do not detailedly study what the content of my own individual message is, then what I'm attempting to do is to improve my life without understanding what the foundation of my operation in life fundamentally is. So this phenomenon that I refer to as New Year's resolutions is a common result of trying to do the work, trying to realize that I need to do some kind of work without really realizing what the foundation of what I do basically is. So I will attempt to do a better job at work. I will attempt to work out better and improve my body at the gym. I will attempt to lose weight and improve my diet, or do any one of these things, or I'll deal with the boss better than I have been, or I'll complete my work, so I'll get to bed earlier, I'll do a better job of getting up. Any of these things which might, in fact, really improve life, you see, and I'm not saying that they couldn't be genuinely beneficial things, but why don't I succeed? What's the problem with getting these things done? Why are these New Year's resolutions that essentially are espoused and I'm dedicated and I really would like to do, and I end up not doing them? I end up doing just the opposite. Because in fact, what is really going on in me will control whether or not I do these things. And if I don't come to an awareness of what is the foundation of what is going on in me, then what I'm trained to do, what I will habitually do, what I will unconsciously do, will in fact control and either compel me to do something I wish I didn't, or won't allow me to do something that I wish I did. And I will have that sense of quote unquote frustration. It's like, I just can't succeed. It never works out. The hell with it, you see. In fact, if you think about it, your individual reaction as you're hearing me talk today, what was your response to the word New Year's resolutions? If you immediately knew what I meant by alluding to these vows that we make as New Year's resolutions, you know, you have in your own experience the reality of how frustrating, how utterly futile it is to make these kinds of decisions, you see. I remember years ago, I remember asking a therapist of mine, why did I have this funny feeling of distance, of unreality, as I read these self-help books that I was reading? And I'll never forget that my therapist said to me, well, it's because the authors don't believe what they say, you see. And what she was indicating to me at the time, and I have held that statement as precious ever since, is that they don't go down to the level of belief, to the reality of where I can do something for myself or really bring it about. So it means that if I cross the threshold into awareness, and if I realize, as I feel is absolutely indispensable, that I have been taught a series of feelings, then the foundation of doing any kind of real work is the deeper and deeper, the assiduous, the energetic, the continuous realization that these particular feelings have been generated in me. Hence, the utter worthlessness of the kinds of generalizations that the DSM imposes on us. In other words, if you feel that you're being diagnosed with a disorder, what that's doing is obliterating the individuality, the individual way that you as an individual, that I as an individual, have taken in the lessons, absorbed the messages, and reached the kind of emotional conclusions that I have. That means that the process of therapy is much more complicated than some little handbook that wants to define the generalized disorders will allow. The work is essentially to realize how I, as an individual, took in the experiences. Now, I want to be clear here. I am in no way talking about a regression, because it is not possible, in my opinion, to go back. And that's another kind of prescription for how therapy is done that I want to resist. In other words, what is going on in you or me, what occurs as the content of my basic training is always going on in the present. And each individual will realize the nature of that differently. In other words, some individuals will have a vivid, clear memory of something that happened 30, 50 years ago, and how a particular pain, how a particular shame, how a particular negative message was imposed. Others will not remember that at all, will have no memory whatever. But the experience in both those cases, and anything in between, of course, is equally real, because the experience of the one who remembers the past and of the one who doesn't is in the present. And the content of those feelings is always in the present tense. So it isn't a matter of necessarily remembering what happened in the past. This is particularly true and particularly tragic in the case of individuals who have been sexually abused as kids. In other words, very often I've encountered the experience where the individual concerned can't allow himself or herself to believe in the reality. They can't remember the actual incidents. Meanwhile, everything in their emotional life is dominated by the fact that they were violated and invaded in that terrible way. All that the individual needs to know is that he or she was violated, is feeling that in the present. If you can't remember who or when or what, it's not important. What's important is that individually, you as an individual know that you have these kinds of feelings that are obviously the byproducts of that dreadful, terrible experience in the past. And that's how that works. So very often, you see, the most important point here, if there are problems, if there are questions of how to live my life, if I'm confronting difficulties, is to start with the fact that the realization of this is not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be an agreeable experience. In other words, some of the feelings, some of the emotions are going to be dark, are going to be painful, are going to be terrible. And it's perfectly all right, it's perfectly right to feel those bad feelings. Now, when I say that, I think like I'm violating the basic assumption, certainly of the drug industry and of a great deal of what's said about medicines and depression and all that nonsense, like you should feel good. Something wrong with me if I don't feel good. I would say just the opposite, that if you didn't feel badly about this, if you didn't feel the negative weight, if you don't realize the way you've been shamed, the way you've been hurt, the way you've been rejected, the way you've been violated in some way, then we need to worry about you. So the bad feeling, if you're feeling them, the difficult feelings, the things you dread, if they're realities, if there's something that really did affect you, you see, it's important to realize you're absolutely right to feel those things, and now we'll start there to understand what it is you aspire to, what it is, what the work you'd like to do really is, and what it aspires to do. Those dreadful bad feelings, those negative messages, are the beginning of the wisdom that we can work forward to do something real, because those feelings, as opposed to these aspirations, these noble desires, you see, these dreadful, dark, bad feelings are the clues to what it is I really aspire to. what I would like my life to be like when it's improved, when it's well led, when I achieve what I would really like to achieve. And if we can accept our own evidence, our own material, the content of our own lives as what we are working with, then we can genuinely begin to work forward and do something positive for ourselves. Now that points to something that I'll say in a subsequent talk, which is that to get a hold of the basic training for its good content, if there be such, and its bad content, if there be such, is in fact the real foundation. So in other words, I have to feel the terror, I have to feel the fear, I have to feel the rejection, I have to feel the sadness, or whatever it is. You see, that was imposed upon me, assuming that that was really part of my own experience, to begin to have the foundation for doing anything real with therapy and what it is that I hope that my therapy will achieve for me. And so there's a kind of dark gateway, it's the only best way to say it, to really doing this, which would be dreaded and one would desire to avoid it with every good justice, with every good reason in the world. But it must be the reality, the foundation, the beginning of letting myself genuinely be there in order for me to do anything real for myself. And therefore, to open the door to a genuine hope of achieving something, a genuine hope of doing something for myself, I must be there. I must be in it as whoever I am to do that kind of work. So there's real hope here, but it's through a dark gateway. Once in one of the workshops I was in, one of the men said, "The way out, the way through is down." And I never forgot his saying that. In a way, that's what I'm saying. And boy, it would certainly be nice if there were another way, but I don't really think there is. I must be there for any work to be done.